Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Giri Varadhari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Giri Varadhari. Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tiravanachari Jamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Giri Varadhari. Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tiravanachari Jamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Giri Varadhari. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajagacharya Asata Sata Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajagacharya Sata Sata Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Prem Shekha Ho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kun Radha Kungir Govardhan Ki Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Shri Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai Shri Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Asamaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki. All glories to the Assembled devotees. All glories to the Assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Glories to Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th canto, 12th chapter, 3rd verse. Yeah. We say chapter 5. Okay, here we are. So I repeat it once, the Sanskrit, and then each word, right? Okay, so Tasmad Bhavantam Mama Shamshayartham Prakshami Paschad Aduna Subodham Adhyatma Yoga Grihitam Tavoktam Akyahi Kautuhala Chetaso Me. Tasma Bhavantam Mama Samyayartam Prashyami Paschad Udana Sudhodam Adhyatma Yoga Grihitam Tavoktam Akyahi Kautuhala Chetaso Me. Tasma Bhavantam Mama Samshayartam Prakshyami Paschad Aduna Subodham Adhyatma Yoga Gratitam Tavoktam Akyahi Kautu Kalacheta Me. Tasma Bhavantam Mama Samshayartam Prakshyami Paschad Aduna Subodham Adhyatma Yoga Grihitam Tavoktam Akyahi Kautuhala Chetaso Me. Please chant. Prakshami Paschad Aduna Subodham Adhyatma Yoga Grititam Tavoktam Avtakti Chetaso Me.
Tasmad Bhavantam Mama Samshayartam
Tasma Bhavantam Mama Samshayartam
Prakshami Paschad Adana Subodham
Prakshami Paschad Aduna Subodham
Adhyatma Yoga Gratitam Tavoktam
Adhyatma Yoga Gratitam Gavoktam
Akyahi Kautuhala Chetaso Me.
Tasmad, therefore, Bhavantam, to you, Mama, of me. Shamshaya artham, the subject matter that is not clear to me. Prakshyami, I shall submit. Paschat, afterwards. Aduna, now. Shubhodham, so that it can be clearly understood. Adhyatma yoga, of mystic instruction for self-realization. Gratitam, as composed. Tava, your. Uktam, speech. Akyahi, please explain again. Kautu halat chetasaha, whose mind is very inquisitive to understand the mystery of such statements. Me, to me. Translation. Whatever doubts I have about a particular subject matter, I shall ask you about later. For the time being, these mysterious yoga instructions you have given me for self-realization appear very difficult to understand. Please repeat them in a single way so that I can understand them. My mind is very inquisitive, and I want to understand this clearly. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. The Vedic literature instructs Tasmad Gurum Prapadyate Jigyashuhu Shu Shreya Uttamam. An intelligent man must be very inquisitive to know the transcendental science deeply. Therefore, one must approach a guru, a spiritual master. Although Jad Bharat explained everything to Maharaj Rahugana, it appears that his intelligence was not perfect enough to understand clearly. He therefore requested a further explanation, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 4:34, Tadvidi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. The student must approach a spiritual master and surrender unto him fully. Pranipatena. He must also question him in order to understand his instructions. Pariprashnena. One should not only surrender to the spiritual master, but also render loving service unto him, sevaya, so that the spiritual master will be pleased with the student and explain the transcendental subject matter more clearly. A challenging spirit before the spiritual master should be avoided if one is at all interested in learning the Vedic instructions in depth. Om Jnana Tamirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuttapada Kamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagradatam Sahagana Bhaganatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakamvitam Scha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandha Jagapate Gopasha Gopika Kantarada Kantanamosite Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshri Krishnamani Sudhiri Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhisha Kripa Sindhuvye Vacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hariva. Pranams. If I can speak anything of value, it would be only because the senior devotees present have given me their blessings and empowered me to do so. That's you too, Bob. And then I didn't prepare for this class. What was that? I did, but I was just a little lazy, honestly. Yeah, so whatever you get is what you get. Had a long day yesterday. I was at the farm doing seva. Before that, I was doing sadhana and other things, and then got back, cooked for the last offering, and then after that, I was doing some other sadhanas, and got back, and then I wasn't finished till like 11:30, which has been my routine lately. I've been going to bed around like 11, 12 each night. Because I made a commitment to a particular training program, since the beginning of the new year, and I have to do it. I have a habit tracking log. If I'm going to read for this amount of time each day, I do it. Doesn't matter if I stay up till 1 o'clock, I'll still get up at 4 the next morning. Or instrument practicing, or various sevas, sadhanas. And it's testing my determination. And I love it though. I like being in that space where you're faced with the challenge, and it's really gonna have to take your innermost strength to persevere and continue. That's really where you find your best self. When you're in adversity or in a challenge situation. So I was going to bed late last night. Went to bed late last night, and this morning I was thinking, well, I could prepare during japa, but then I'll miss out on japa. And then you got to make it up throughout the day, and it becomes a whole thing. Right? Anybody who's giving class and prepared during japa, it's like a whole thing. So it's my first class in a while, so I don't expect it to be gold, but we'll see what we can do. I'm very grateful to what is your name? Seven? That's a really amazing name. And this is your first time for the morning program? Well, I really appreciate your sincerity that you came here, and just to learn our teachings and to practice with us. Yeah, the entire japa. Yeah. So yeah, it means the world to us. Thank you. Tapas Prabhu, who is online with us?
Anand Prabhu and one Mataji, Namaja Mataji, and Vijay Prabhu online in the Zoom. And we have, I think, 14 to 15 people watching the YouTube.
Okay, about 17 devotees. Yeah, so Prabhupada is here outlining the process of Krishna consciousness. For one who is seeking advancement on the spiritual path, seeking self-realization must therefore approach a qualified person, the Guru. And one should inquire and surrender unto him. Render service. And the spiritual master, being pleased with the student's sincerity, will impart knowledge within his heart. Amma Jnana Tamarandasya, right? This is really the stepping stone to beginning spiritual life. This desire to know more, to know the absolute. And the realized spiritual soul can impart that truth unto the sincere disciple. I appreciate the last sentence of the purport where Prabhupada says, a challenging spirit before the spiritual master should be avoided if one is at all interested in learning the Vedic instructions in depth. Because he's speaking so much of the mood of a disciple. And that mood is one of humility. When we approach our elders, when we approach Guru, we don't know anything. Our cup is empty. We should feel like chaste soldiers, ready and willing to execute anything. As Prabhupada would say, the Guru would say, jump, and then the disciple says, how high? It's really the spirit of humility that inspires the Guru to bestow his mercy. What is true humility? I don't know what true humility is. I think I might get glimpses of it here and there when I'm aspiring to chant japa, but I'm just so deluded by false ego that I have to make a conscious intention to be humble. And so the main thing is to recondition the self. All of us being in the material world, we are affected by pride. But before Guru, we are simply just the humble, aspiring servant. In fact, a devotee doesn't even think, a true devotee does not even think he's a devotee, right? So none of us should even be thinking we're Vaishnavas. If anybody has asked if we're Vaishnavas, we can say we're aspiring Vaishnavas. We have one realized teacher in our line, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who is the guru of our founder, Srila Prabhupada. And when people would go and approach him to meet with him, he would ask, are you a devotee of Krishna? And if they said, yes, I'm a devotee of Krishna, he would say, okay, very good, I have some things to do. But if another person came and asked, are you a devotee of Krishna? And that person said, no, I'm a devotee of Krishna. And then you'll say, very nice. And you'll give him all the time in the world. And that's really where the highest pleasure is. In this position of Das, Anu Das. Das, servant, Anu, the very small. Das, servant of the servant, of each other. It's beautiful how vibrant and attractive a community can become when we all embrace the spirit of Das Anu Das. We become so nourished by that association within our own Sangha, and those who are looking within are attracted to join our Sangha. And what does that spirit of servant of the servant look like? It looks like love and trust amongst devotees. It looks like selfless service. It looks like offering genuine care and concern to one another. It looks like appreciating one another. It looks like acknowledging the sacrifice of each other. And it looks like and feels like we're all a team connected to one mission. We're all one family, aspiring to elevate in Krishna consciousness together and spread the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. A healthy community means healthy relationships. And when that becomes the emphasis, the result of that will be that the devotees will feel very content and satisfied. So we have to be that example for each other. We have to live that example through our interactions, through how we conduct ourselves. And in this way, we'll get the full mercy of Sri Shiradi Giridhari. Just a few things on the purport. The verse, I thought it was quiet. I thought it brought a significant point. Here, Maharaj Rahugana is asking Jad Bharat to re-explain the mysterious yoga instructions he says is given, that he has given, as it's very difficult to understand. Please repeat them in a way so that I can understand them. My mind is very inquisitive, and I want to understand them clearly. I wonder what will it take to attract the world to Krishna consciousness. You know, I think this verse is especially insightful as to help us contemplate how we can do so. I think if we're trying to reach any audience in an effective and impactful way, the greatest thing we can ask ourselves is, now what will it take me to speak, to say, to inspire this other person? And so here we have, he's already hungry. Maharaj Rahugana is seeking. He wants to know the knowledge, but it was presented in a way he couldn't understand. So I see that some of this is very relevant to us in our preaching because there's so many people who come, and I wonder if there's a way we can accommodate them. And we are, through the medium of Krishna Lounge, this newcomer audience. And so I feel like to really understand what will inspire another person, you have to really understand that person's demographic, that person's level of knowledge, that person's sincerity, where the person's at. And with all of these, seeing things in the light of those contexts, in that context, we will know how to share the ancient wisdom in a way that can really inspire them. Sometimes people come and they're so inspired to learn, but then we speak in some ways esoterically. Perhaps it's too advanced. It's a way it's above their pay grade. It's above their knowledge. It's above their realizations. We just tell them, just do this, do that. And that's, for some people, that will work. For some people, they need even more basic understanding to enter into even that level. So it's really an act of compassion to meet them on that level. Whereas to just impose and just give them too much and expect them to just figure it out. To take them by the hand and walk them through our philosophy. So sometimes that means we have to tone it down, or sometimes that means we have to be a little bit flexible about how we present Krishna consciousness. It doesn't mean that we compromise. We never compromise. But there's almost a certain art to just saying something and it being the same message but having a profound effect on the individual. And I think His Grace Vaisheshika Prabhu, I think Devanrita Swami, I think Radhanath Swami, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, and these many exalted leaders. I can't think all of them right now, but there's a certain reason why they just attract the world by how they preach. They're Vaisheshika Prabhu is preaching in Apple, these major corporations, and these major leadership meetings and things like that. And he's making Radhanath Swami at the House of Congress. He's making bhakti wisdom accessible to these large audiences, or these very aristocratic audiences. And they're becoming attracted. Same message, but it's relevant to them. Krishna's been putting me in some very interesting places. A few days ago, I was at a friend's house, and he's a major celebrity. He has money, he has a nice house, he has a nice car. He has all the talent. Everywhere he goes, people want to take pictures with him, get his autograph. Has a huge following of thousands and thousands of people. But one thing that I really appreciate about him is that he's very humble. When we go out on book distribution, which I've been doing for the last 7 years, sometimes we'll just go on a street corner. like in Ocean Beach, I'm like usually at the corner. And then average American people are coming, but yet they're not so receptive. A lot of them just kind of blow me off. It's like, who is this person just seeking donations or charity, basically. It's a very humbling service. Like I was walking to Ralph's, was it yesterday, the day before, and there's some people collecting for some foundation to provide food for those who in need, but then the mood was kind of like people were just trying to avoid them so they won't be influenced. Or that's generally the case. It's interesting how the tables have turned. Being on the other side, where here are these high-profile people, but yet they're seeking me, and they want to collaborate with me. And the very people that I used to look up to are becoming my close friends and crew. If there's any success, if I'm allowed to be an instrument in any way, it's only because I tried to follow in the footsteps of these exemplary leaders, like by Shishik Prabhu. Radhanath Swami, it's an art. If we simply try to present Krishna consciousness in a way relevant to people, people will be so moved. So attracted. And so it's really an act of compassion, again, to meet them on that level. Those are just a couple things that came to mind, some points that I extracted from the purport and verse. I would really love to just churn the butter and see
Hare Krishna.
What devotees, Haribol Vijay Krishna Prabhu. So we'll see if there's anybody at the temple.
Yes, here? I can wait, no
Okay.
problem.
Okay. Trivita Prabhu, pranams.
At the beginning, Prabhupada quotes a portion of a verse that he would often quote about the importance of approaching a guru. Tasmad gurum prapadeja jigyasha shreya uttamam. And I'd known that verse for years, but I wasn't aware of what came before it, because when it begins with therefore. So I was curious about what came before that. And if you'll allow me, it's a universal instruction. This is from the 11th canto. It's Yogendra speaking. Oh, it won't go to 11th. All right, let me just. And I just want to review the reasons why he says therefore, because it's universal instruction here. And of course, it pertains to what's happening in our current reading. So, King Nimi asked, now I wish to learn about the illusory potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, which bewilders even great mystics. My lords, please speak to us about this subject. And what the... oh, wait a minute. Okay, Antariksha answers. So, oh God. Sorry, 11:3:21. I'm in the wrong. Give me a second here. All right. So, yeah. Okay, so Prabhupada is answering the question. The question is, "O great sage, please explain how even a foolish materialist can easily cross over the illusory energy of the Supreme Lord, which is always insurmountable for those who are not self-controlled." Now, I was immediately attracted. Being a foolish materialist, I was thinking, this is pertinent for me. You know, it's universal, especially for Kali Yuga. You know. So he answers this way very nicely. Accepting the roles of male and female, he shows how there's no happiness. This word Shreya means ultimate happiness, ultimate good fortune. And he shows how in all material sphere, no matter where you are, you can never achieve it. Accepting the roles of male and female in human society, the conditioned souls unite in sexual relationships. Thus, they constantly make material endeavors to eliminate their unhappiness and unlimitedly increase their pleasure. That's universal. But one should see that they inevitably achieve exactly the opposite result. In other words, their happiness inevitably vanishes, and as they grow older, their material discomfort increases. So now the next choice is, so then he describes how it happens. Wealth is a perpetual source of distress. It is most difficult to acquire, and it is virtual death for the soul. What satisfaction does one actually gain from his wealth? Similarly, how can one gain ultimate or permanent happiness from one's so-called home, children, relatives, and domestic animals? So you can fill in vehicles, cars, which are all maintained by one's hard-earned money. So that's on this plane. Then what about heaven? One cannot find permanent happiness even on the heavenly planets, which one can attain in the next life by ritualistic ceremonies and sacrifices. Even in material heaven, the living entity is disturbed by rivalry with his equals and envy of those superior to him. And since one's residence in heaven is finished with the exhaustion of his pious fruitive activities, the denizens of heaven are afflicted by fear, anticipating the destruction of their heavenly life. Thus they resemble kings who, though enviously admired by ordinary citizens, are constantly harassed by enemy kings who therefore never attain actual happiness. So now we've eliminated heaven. So then he says, therefore, and that's the present verse, anyone who seriously desires real happiness must seek a bona fide spiritual master and take shelter of him by initiation. The qualification of the bona fide guru is that he has realized the conclusions of the scriptures by deliberation and is able to convince others of these conclusions. Such great personalities who have taken shelter of the Supreme Lord, leaving aside all material considerations, should be understood to be bona fide spiritual masters. So this is a central principle, and it's happening right here on the our current readings, where Rahugana is taking shelter of Jada Bharat unexpectedly. And this idea of knowing that, realizing that there can be no happiness without transcending this plane and this whole, and being completely ignorant about it, that's a prerequisite for approaching the Guru, and it's happening there. So I thought I'd just share that because that's so much.
Thank you. Hariva. Anybody else? Hariva.
Thank you, Damodar, for a wonderful class. That was very nice. It was like a freestyle. It just flowed. It was really nice to be in that mellow.
Your mercy, Prabhu, and all the devotees.
In the beginning of your talk, I really liked the way you talked about shifting gears for preaching and meeting people with where they're at and being attentive to their mood and being flexible with that. And we take a lot of inspiration from you as our Sankirtan leader here. In a sense, like we were really inspired when you were on the road traveling Sankirtan, and we got a score at Cal Poly where you distributed 100 Gitas in one day. And we had a brief description of kind of what that mood felt like because you had talked to Maharaj about it. And he said that they were just flying off the table and people were really receptive and there was just a groove you hit. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering we haven't really talked about that, what that was like. Like what was special about that day where you were distributing 100 Gitas to that type of people, and how did they just kind of fly off the table? Like how did you meet that group of people to have such a successful day distributing our important book?
I think Cal Poly was probably one of my, if not my favorite university that I distributed at on my trip. At least one of the top two. Cal Poly has this very SoCal surf vibe, even though it's a bit up north. It has a very surf vibe to it, and so there was a natural rapport that I had with the students there. In terms of lingo, in terms of dress and how we associated, that I felt like I just connected really well with those type of students. Also UNR, University of Reno, was really sweet. That day, I did 100 Gitas. I got terrible rest the night before. Probably about maybe 3-4 hours, and then even then it was choppy. waking up in between. I wasn't feeling well, but I was just thinking, this is my service, I have to do it. And I want to please my seniors, I want to please the devotees, and I want to serve this community over here. So I just tried to distribute books that day, and at a certain point I brought a certain amount of books, but then I mainly brought Gitas and some other titles, and I was mainly trying to distribute the other titles, and then I was only left with Gitas at a certain point, and the van was too far to get more books, so all I had was Gitas. So I was like, all right, well, I'm going to do all the Gitas. And it was a bit daunting at first, but I honestly wasn't expecting to do that well. I was just doing the service, and I was trying to immerse myself in the service. And at the end of the day, all the books went out, and then when I counted the Lakshmi even, I was very surprised. So, what was your question again? I just wanted to hear about the day. Yeah. Right. And I more or less, I think there's many principal lines you will say to people. It's crazy that I would say lines, but the interactions were very, we were trying to keep them genuine and raw and real. And I think people feel that when you have something that you really, like how they say, like you can only sell something that you believe in, is like if you're passionate about something and you people will feel that, and that perhaps that's what was happening in those interactions. People could feel the energy, and it just happened. So, Haribo. Yeah.
Thank you, Damodara Prabhu. Wonderful class. My question was regarding to how you said that distributing books is like a art style, and that it's a way of being creative and being expressive in a way that we can distribute knowledge of Krishna consciousness. And so my question is, do you have any tips on like how one can be themselves on books, and what is like an appropriate way? Because sometimes we can go off track. So how does like staying one focus on Krishna consciousness but also being themselves when distributing the books?
How to stay on track, be oneself while simultaneously being focused. Can you do both at the same time? Can you be yourself and be focused?
I guess let me, if I give like my example. So if I'm on books sometimes, like I get in the flow of like doing distributing books, but then sometimes you get caught on like some of those fanatical Christians or whatever. But then you kind of just like you're trying to like talk to them, trying to get the message. But then you kind of wasted a lot of time or something like that. And then because you were trying to be yourself in a way, you're like, hey, I'm trying to help you understand. There's more than just what we can believe in. There's always different philosophies and stuff. But my question really is just like, how can we maintain to just like being ourselves but not get too absorbed in the part of we're getting like too involved with the person, because of that, if we get too involved, we waste time. We're not distributing books.
So your definition of being yourself is interacting with people and extending a conversation. I'm a little confused.
Okay, well let me just scratch it out then.
Yeah.
So how does one just be creative in distributing books? Let me just keep it simple that way.
Creative in distributing books.
Yeah.
All right. If I were to answer your first question, I would say just do that. If if you didn't link the meaning to being yourself with extending a conversation with others, like Christians, as an example that you gave, if it was just the actual question in itself, how to be yourself and be focused, I would say you can do both. And I feel like when you are just yourself, and the one thing that attracts people more than anything is authenticity. If you're acting outside of your personality, people will sense that. If you're chanting genuine rounds and meditating, people will know you're a genuine sadhu because they can feel it in your vibrations. Like His Grace Vaisheshika Prabhu would say, when you go out to meet people, they can sense they can tell if you chanted your 16 rounds. It's in your aura, it's in your demeanor, it's your very consciousness that people are experiencing when they interact with us. How do we stay creative in book distribution or in outreach? Use it as a means of creative expression. You know, outreach is so vast. There's there's billions of people on this planet. There's so many different demographics. And there's certain people who can be empowered to reach a certain audience more effectively than another. And so we all kind of have our different ways, unique abilities in how we can reach people. And so for ourselves, we can try to encourage one another, empower one another, and say like, oh, if you have an idea to reach this demographic, then why not? You know, you coming from that demographic makes you the most qualified person. That's how you become creative in outreach. For instance, Bhakti Dimitri, I'm not saying he's doing this. It's not even in the air, but he's Russian. He comes from Russia, and obviously he knows how Russians live, their lingo, what their interest, and so he's the most qualified person to really preach to Russians. He can, if he wanted, he can do this whole thing where he's doing outreach to so many Russians. There's a huge Russian community here in San Diego, right? I wouldn't be so empowered to do that service. I can try. You know, like Tamal Krishna Maharaj, we sent him to China and then he figured it out. And the thing is, what his disciple Gauranga Prema Prabhu has said is that the reason why Tamal Krishna Maharaj was so successful is because he knew the psychology of the people. And that's the advantage of a person coming out of a particular demographic. They know how these people think. Prakash is from South India. If I try to preach to Indians of our age, mid-20s, you know, you grew up in an entirely different culture than me. You grew up in India. And you grew up playing different sports, different interests, a different way of speaking, different way of dressing, you know, certain conditionings, cultural conditionings, family upbringings. Like it's a whole thing. So for me to preach to Indian youth, I got to figure it out. I got to do some research. But Prakash, you already know. You're one of them. You can talk to them and relate. And perhaps inspire them much more than I can. And so this is how we become creative in outreach or in yoga. You know, a lot of people come from the yoga scene, so they preach Krishna consciousness and yoga. They're already interested in Indian and Vedic culture. So, okay, is that okay? Hari Hari. Okay, any other ones present here? Okay. No? Okay. Vijay Prabhu, Vijay Krishna.
Yes, Damodara Prabhu, thank you very much. You're very kind. The quote from the translation related to the verse you chose for today is the last sentence of the translation. Quote, "My mind is very inquisitive, and I want to understand this clearly." End quote. So based on this quote, my question is as follows. What is the benefit of having a very inquisitive mind?
Thank you. That's a really, thank you for turning.
You're
me.
welcome, Prabhu.
Yes. That's really the way to the next level, is always inquiring. It's really trying to dissect something and to know everything about a certain subject and feeling the desire to know more. That helps us progress, not just spiritually, but even practically. And when we come to a certain level of desire, or all we can do is become immersed in desire, obsessed. When you're obsessed with something, that's all you want. And you'll learn everything about it. Like, say if you were obsessed with a girl, you'll learn everything about her. If you're obsessed with a sport, soccer, and you want to be the best soccer player ever, you'll learn everything about that sport. How do you learn? You ask a million questions. Thank you, Prabhu.
Outstanding answer to my question. You're amazing, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Nice class. Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you.
Thank you, Danavari Mataji, by your blessings. Anything else? Okay, Gantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Glorious Prabhu.